Welcome to The Jungle, where we discuss social science and applications to business and society. My name is Doug Lepisto, and I am co-founder of Sleeping Giant Capital and the Center for Principal Leadership and Business Strategy at Western Michigan University. Today, my guest is Dr. Sue Ashford, who is the Michael and Susan Jandernoa Professor in the Management and Organizations Group at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. She's a world expert on leadership and leadership development. We discuss her recent book, The Power of Flexing: How to Use Small Daily Experiments to Create Big, Life-Changing Growth. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So, Sue, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Doug.
So when's the last time we saw each other?
Gosh, in person might have been at a May meeting way back when, or at Academy when you were doing your session on interaction chain rituals.
Yes. Well, so did you go to the May meeting this year?
No, I was not able. Yeah.
I didn't. It was this first one that I missed that was in person. So I was kind of bummed not to. Wendy Smith and I talked about that. I think we recorded on actually the day that the May meeting was going on. So so how have you been?
I've been great. I've been really enjoying this new chapter in my academic life because, as you know, I've never written a book before, and it turns out writing a book brings a lot of very fun things into your life.
A lot of new learning experiences.
Learning experiences, people understand, like my family, like they understand what I do for the first time because a book they can relate to. But people read the book and come up to me and tell me how useful it was to them. And I've learned that my love language is being useful, being useful. And so when I hear that, it really makes me feel good. And, not that many people come up and tell you that your articles are useful. So.
Well, and that you in the afterword of the book is kind of the process of you writing this book and putting it off and kind of having, so maybe talk a little bit about what motivated you now to, you're a scholarly academic, so you're publishing academic research, science-based research to peer-reviewed journals. Now you write a book, something you put off. Your book is all about uncomfortable experiences, challenges, learning in transition. So what was the motivation to take that step now and write a book?
Yeah, it was just something that kept percolating. I think I described in the afterword, but also in one of the May meetings, I described how, I'd say, I want to write a book. People are writing books. It looks so exciting. And then I'd go to the bookstore and say, the world does not need another book. And I just keep going through that cycle. But it kept coming back to me. And, on my academic side, I do scholarly research. But I'm all about my real purpose in doing this career that I've discovered as it's unfolded is trying to help people to be maximally effective in their organizational lives to achieve what they want in their work settings. And all of my teaching is about that. And really a lot of my research is too. So, I've gotten way more involved in the last 15 years in leadership development. And, those people have to be maximally personally and interpersonally effective because they're the instrument through which they lead. And so if they've got some major flaw, like they don't listen well, or they turn people off by their language, or they, aren't assertive enough, it's going to really be a problem. So it felt like there's a need. These people need help growing, and they're also hugely busy. So the real puzzle was, how do you help busy people to grow? Because not everyone can come and take a class here at Michigan or, get involved in a degree program, et cetera. And yet the need to grow is perennial.
And so, just as introduction for you, so you're the Michael and Susan Jandernoa Professor in the Management Organization Group at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. And what was interesting to see was, as a scholar, to see some of the individual papers that you've written on identity development and leadership and seeking feedback, proactivity. All these research papers come together in a kind of a coherent arc. Did that, and that's your expertise. You've taught on leadership development, done research on leadership development, voice, issue selling, proactivity, papers that have really, changed scholarly understanding, advanced how academics think about improving leadership, improving organizations. You've won awards from our Academy of Management. So you've had a really distinguished career across lots of different areas. And it seems like you've brought a lot of those topics and interests together in a book. Did this kind of come together for you? How did you see all those pieces of your research coming together? You've done research on gig work. How did all those pieces kind of come together in writing this?
Yeah. Yes, it really encompasses, I look at it as, this is everything I know. Here you go. And hope that it's helpful to people. Because it really weaves together all sorts of strands from various studies and programs of research that I've been involved in. And that's been the great joy of it. It's like, what a great thing to be able to weave together and produce. And the weaving happened, it's not like I saw the framework and wrote it. It kept happening. The book was a joy. I would like there'd be something that I make reference to, something we used to do at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College when I was on the faculty there. We held an interpersonal boot camp. And literally it would be one manager was sent up to get worked on because this person had such interpersonal and personal effectiveness issues. And, it's like bringing that back and sort of saying, here's an example here of something that has been done and could be done. All three of my kids are in the book because stories about them are really relevant to make an example of some point. And so the book is a great joy to me for that. The framework really came together through my work on leadership development. It was when Scott DeRue joined our faculty as an assistant professor. He and I sort of said, at that time, there was a prominent perspective in our field about leadership is learned through experiences. Morgan McCall, this was not new. It was but in the 90s. But Scott and I were talking and we said, people can go through experiences and learn really different amounts. Sort of depends on whether they're paying attention, whether they're thinking about themselves in that experience, whether they are focused on some way they want to grow, and whether they were, all the different things that came together in the book. And we just kind of made up a list of these practices, and it sort of started from there. Scott, as you know, went on to very quickly in the annals of academic history to become our dean within, I think, 8 years of joining our faculty as a brand new assistant professor. And you're smiling because that never happens. But it happened in his case. And in which point I said, Scott, you're not really going to write a book with me, are you? And he said, no, I don't think so. So I just kept going on my own. But I really fell in love with the framework that we started and that I kept developing because it did bring together pretty much everything I've ever thought as a person focusing on organizations and helping people to be effective in them.
And what's the motivation? I mean, you have a great line and in terms of the teaching that I do, I love this line, learning by doing an experience as a teacher. But that experiences themselves don't teach. People need to learn.
Right.
Where does that motivation for you personally come from to, out of all the academic interests you could have, to focus on the power of learning effectively from experience? What is your own personal connection to that?
Yeah. Well, I'd say two prongs. One is I've had a lifelong love affair with the idea of agency, that people are more agentic than we give them credit for. It started by the tenor of the field when I came into it. When I came into it, all we did was take the manager's point of view. People were important because they needed to be affected by managers so that the work would get done in a way that would make the manager and the company successful. They were seen as a means to an end. We didn't focus very much at all at that time on what are the people doing, thinking, feeling, except for, are they satisfied? If they're satisfied with their jobs, good. They'll perform better. It'll be good. And I thought, this is really weird. So my very first research interest was on feedback. And at that time, the feedback literature in academia was all on how do we give effective feedback. And I thought, people aren't just waiting around to get feedback. They're seeking it all the time. And they're coming to conclusions about whether they'll be successful here, whether their boss likes them, and so forth. So, I wanted to study that. And that set me on this path of studying human agency. Feedback seeking, issue selling is about managers don't just wait for the strategy to come down from on high. They're trying to influence the strategy. Gig workers is probably the most extreme instantiation of that, because gig workers are just like on their own. They're all they've got, so they have to be agentic. So I have a love affair with agency. And so the people have to learn part comes from that I would naturally be drawn to studying very effective people that get more out of the experiences they're having through their own agency. And then the second part is is just kind of how I study organizations anyway. I study organizations by studying my own experiences in them. Either, when I was a grad student, I observed that we all interpreted everything as feedback. We sought feedback all the time. Why did that professor say hi to my friend, but not to me? What does that mean? Do I have no future? We were interpreting everything. And so that's been a big wellspring of research ideas and insight, is studying my experiences, what I'm doing. And so it just seemed like if people could be more mindful of themselves and their learning in their experiences, it could be a way to grow. And it's a way to grow that's useful to very busy people, because busy people don't have time to go off and take a 4-week course, but they could be a little more mindful in the experiences they're having anyway about themselves and their growth. And so I think I was attracted to it for those two reasons. It's kind of how I approach life. And also, I just think that people have agency, and when they exercise their agency, it's a beautiful thing.
And your book, The Power of Flexing, and we always want to know as academics what happens after the colon, right? What's how to use small daily experiments to create big life-changing growth. And as I read that on the subtext to your book, and then kind of looked at it myself, I thought your book in some ways is much broader than that. It's about how we orient ourselves to our experiences, right? How we relate to how we frame our experiences, how we reflect or not on our experiences to learn, how we handle our emotions relative to those experiences, how we seek understanding from others about our experience to validate or change it. And there's all these different ways that really, when you put them together, it becomes this nice system of how you orient yourself to these experiences. I'd love for you to kind of, for folks who are interested in the book, maybe lay out some of the core pillars of what your book shows of how people should relate to these experiences, including having experiments
as a part of that
Yes.
experience?
In your version, it would be a very long subtitle.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and about subtitles, I will say that the publishing world is not afraid of hyperbole, so so it's a little bit of that in there, but I've gotten much more comfortable with it. But yeah, I mean, the book lays out 6 practices, 6 simple things you can do that will enhance your ability to learn from the experiences you're going through anyway. And when I workshop it with people in companies or with students who come here to Ross, I say, if you do any one of these things, you'll be better off. But the 6 kind of work as a system. They reinforce each other. And so you're right, experimenting is only one of them. It starts with kind of how you think about achievement. And this is a complete borrow of Carol Dweck's ideas about the growth mindset. But if you go into an achievement situation with a performance proof mindset, your only goal is to make sure everyone knows you've got what it takes. You can dominate whatever's put in front of you. It's a very brittle mindset. And when you start to have challenges and setbacks, which the people I work with, more mature leaders are having, it tends to crumble. And so getting yourself into and keeping yourself into more of a learning mindset. What is there for me to learn here? How can I grow here? I don't know if I can do this challenge, but I know it's going to help me to try to tackle it. Those kinds of more expansive thoughts can really help you. So as you're approaching an experience, but also during it, as you reflect on it, just staying in that growth mindset can be super useful. So that's probably the least new part of the book, but people find it really useful.
Well, even just even on that point, though, I think you have an example of labeling an experience. The power of language. As people who are interested in cognition and organizations. What the label you put on a situation has such a changes your orientation and others' orientation to that. But even simply just calling something an adventure just opens up a different way of thinking about something new and uncomfortable. That makes it a little bit exciting, makes it a little bit something you want to lean into.
Yes, I love that. One of the people we interviewed 72 people for the book, and they were people sort of known to be effective or thought to be effective in their worlds, like on these various topics. And one guy used that same metaphor of adventure. It's going to be, and I love that. It does reframe it pretty simply. The other is, and this is a borrow from Carol Dweck, it's the power of the word yet. Like, I am not a leader, and you just add the word yet, which opens you up to growing. It opens you up to there's possibility to grow, rather than I'm not a leader, which is very definite and very much separating you from that, ability to perform in that area. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that experiences are totally chaotic. We all get involved in, like we're just reacting without thinking in our experiences, and especially thinking about ourselves and our growth. So the second one is really trying to help people to bring a focus to their development, and this focus can change all the time. Some are perennials, I need to work on my multitasking. That's a perennial for me, because sometimes it doesn't allow me to be fully present when I'm talking to someone, for example. But sometimes they can be just ones you pick up, in this meeting with these people, I need to work on my patience, and I'm going to be meeting with them weekly for the next month. So, it's something I can work on. So it's like really figuring out what is the thing you need to, you want to bring some focus on. And there are kind of 2 buckets of things. One came of where these triggers, what triggers this growth? One came from what we called the pain of the present. There's something in the present situation that's causing you pain, or you can see you're causing pain to others. And it's by your actions. We talked to one person who described how her overly effusive positive reactions never left anyone else any room to have themselves a positive reaction or to disagree and have a negative reaction. It felt really bad to do that. And so they're little things. This is a growth model that says it's not monolithic. You don't need to become a whole new person, but at the margin, you can work on things. There was a time when I had all of my kids home, and now they have spouses. And I think I had my sibling and her husband, and my goal was patience. Well, I need to work on my patience for that time. And then when they all moved on, then it wasn't such a hot issue. So the issue changes, but it's at the margin for me to be effective in this situation, or the thing I need to grow on now based on the pain I see that I caused. So pain of the present was one bucket. The other was fantasies of the future. It's like future Sue. It's going to be very zen. It's going to have it together. It's not going to get stressed. Current Sue has some issues with that. So it's kind of like some people would say, I observe this person. I want to be like that person. So it create a draw to grow in that way. That's the second one. It's just bringing a focus to what is it you want to learn about you in this experience.
And one thing just to hop in on that second bucket is it presupposes what is, kind of we talked about at the beginning, which is this taking personal responsibility for your own growth.
Yes.
And I think that is such a powerful and simple but overlooked idea that it is within your control, and you can be deliberate about that, and you can own that. And I'd be curious what you see today with leaders, with young people. Do you see this adopted more in terms of this, being personally responsible for growth, or do you see this happening less, where people still have not found that? Just before you move on to these other buckets on your framework, I'm just curious on that piece.
Okay, but Doug, we call them practices, not buckets.
Practices.
Well, it's interesting because it's an area where we don't have much literature on the academic side. In fact, we have a proposal out to write a review that brings together the 6 places where we talk about growth to try to get it as a topic on the map for academics. So it's a little unknown. I mean, one theme that's come out about that is that younger people care about the chance to grow in organizational settings. So, if they don't feel like they get that chance, they're less happy in their work. They may be more likely to go try and find it somewhere else. So it's a source of meaning for them, and meaning is important. Whether they've caught on to you need to own it yourself, I don't know.
What's your personal take on that? Because I'd be curious, because I think I have a take
about young people.
Yeah, that I almost feel like there is less of an understanding that the growth is limitless within them. That the power is there within them always, and it's a mindset versus there's something outside of me that will give me the opportunity to grow, or give me the permission to do it. When all these things can happen in these very small moments, what am I doing with my face in this meeting? Am I actively, all these small little things are opportunities to grow but you have to be responsible for identifying those things. And my sense is that it's more exterior, less interior of where that responsibility lies for growth.
Yeah, super interesting. I would say my comment that young people are looking for growth in organizations, and if they don't find it, they're going to go somewhere else, would be very aligned with that externalization of the power. My personal feeling about this agency issue is that I think we'd be better off thinking about it as a state that people enter and exit. And the goal would be to get people into that state more often. I know for me, my life has fluctuated between highly agentic, I'm the creator of my own life, I'm floating, a little bit, so it's not so much I'm waiting for someone else to grow me, but I'm not actively engaged. And I like to say, and that's okay, that nobody can be at a 10 all the time on going on all cylinders all the time, that there's fallow periods and fertile periods.
And so I took you off your practices.
Yeah.
So you start with the sense that you can grow individually, and that's within your control. You adopt a mindset that you're not about performance. This is about learning. And then you adopt a goal. And that goal can be,
I call it a focus, because it's not like a goal, like we're going to measure achievement. It's just like, let's bring a focus to your attention as you go into the situation. And I did want to say even though I think of it as growth, fertile, fallow, I don't like the giving over of it altogether to situations. So if young people are doing that would seem bad, because situations don't love you. You got to love yourself. Organizations will love you one day and get rid of you the next, and you got to go on and grow somewhere else. So I think it's important. And I like the point you raised. So the next practice really is sort of saying, well, so what are you going to do? You want to become a better listener, more patient, less exuberant in all situations, whatever it might be. What are you going to do? It doesn't change if you just keep doing what you always do, or you don't give it any thought. So when I workshop this with people, we actually write experiments that we could do, possibilities. What little things can you do? Little things. We had one guy who was working on trying to become more approachable, because more than one person had called him formidable. And he said, this isn't good. I want to be more approachable. His experiments that he tried when he was doing this 9-month task force, they were having meetings every month. And he said, well, I'm going to get there early. I'm going to greet everybody. Because usually you just come flying in at the last second, get right to work. And the second one was, I'm going to sit on the side rather than the power seat on the end. And the third one was, I'm going to smile more. He said that was the most important one. Smile more. So little experiments. Again, this whole idea is that change doesn't have to be monolithic. And this one isn't even monolithic in the way that, people get you into exercise programs where they say, just walk around the block, 1 block, you can do it. Everybody knows where that one's going. The next day it's 2 blocks, and pretty soon you're running 3 miles. I don't want to run 3 miles. This one is just at the 1 block level all the time. Just do a little bit, try it out. And then the next practice is
what you said there, I thought was also, you make this comment in the book, and I think this one is so true. And it's true what I see in terms of the leadership development we do in our program. What we see with the executives we work with is, sure, Sue, sounds great. Be more approachable. Sounds that that's obvious. That's easy. But the problem is in the doing, is what you said on page 21. I wrote, because that means new behaviors, new ways of being. And it is so easy to say, but really hard to do.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And taking those little steps, smiling where you sit, can help you unlock that. So I just wanted to lift that up, because I think it's so important for people to hear, because they'll say, yeah, but if you actually put it into practice, it's a different animal.
Yeah. And that leads really well into the next practice, because the problem is in the doing. And in most worlds, your personal and interpersonal effectiveness, which is such an integral part of leadership, isn't judged by you. It's judged by everybody else. It's very subjective. When I teach this, I always say, if you sing in the shower and you think you're, Rihanna, like, fine, but if you go out in the world and you aren't, it ain't going to be good. So, so for this one, it's really about trying to figure out a way to get feedback. And, we talk about the costs and benefits of two different ways. One is, oftentimes you can just observe and you can see how things are going. In my classroom, if people are falling asleep, I'm like, okay, this part is not good. This part of this class is not good. And you can kind of tell. And the other option is you can ask people, how am I doing? Both of these have their problems. Sometimes you observe, and if you are anxious about a certain thing, you pay attention to negative feedback about that thing, indicators that you're not making it, you're not being, like, let's say you want to give a speech as a leader and you want to be dynamic and you're worried about this as a quality that you might hold. And so you tend to, notice the people that are looking at their watch or, don't look interested, kind of thing. So that's a problem. And then for asking, for inquiry, there's this problem of people like to tell you what they think you want to hear, especially if you have higher rank than them. I'm around more and more retired people, and the men crack me up, especially the men who've been like more senior executives. They go, Sue, nobody laughs at my jokes anymore. And I'm like, yeah, well, do you wonder about that?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. So you've got to overcome these problems. So it's not a simple seek more feedback. You need people's feedback to know how well you're doing. You got to figure out ways to get it, ways to make people feel safe to give you good feedback if you ask, ways not to misinterpret things if you're observing. And so we talk about that a lot because a lot of it is very context specific. So in workshops in companies, people will say, well, in this company, you can tell because the boss does this, and everyone knows, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a clue. So that kind of thing.
That the inquiry piece and seeking feedback is, I think, another really undervalued but important practice. I see it, especially the deficit of that with young people. And so often, here's my hot take on this, and I can get on a rant about this, is we bring young people in universities, in K-12, into situations where they're often producing things, especially business students, that don't require any seeking feedback.
Right.
They deliver the paper, they deliver the presentation. It's a one and done. When most work is iterative, it's a back and forth. And we don't put them in positions where they must seek feedback, and that's a good thing. And if someone says, it's not good, that it doesn't crush them. I know we'll talk about, that practice of managing your emotions, but even giving them some simple phrases that you have in the book, how can I do this better in the future? If you were in my shoes, what would you do differently? Am I missing something? What's your perspective on this? When I see young people who can unlock that, not only does their work get better, but their anxiety goes down. Their relationships get better because they have reason to make those contacts with people usually above them. It's such a generative thing, and yet we don't really. And what's interesting is I find that the design students that I end up teaching who come into the business school are often way beyond the business students in their ability to be effective, because they're doing unknown things and they're really good at seeking that feedback, getting critiqued, doing these charrettes, as they would call them. I just think that is such an important thing that could be taught more. It's really important.
Well, I love your enthusiasm for that topic. That was my dissertation way back when. Feedback.
It is. I know the paper that you're referring to, right? It's so I just want to call attention to that one because it's such an easy, simple thing. And it's easy and simple. And everybody can do that. And it improves your work. It lowers your anxiety. It builds relationships. So
Yeah. And maybe one thing I can tell your listeners that might be helpful is, there's three reasons why people don't seek feedback. One is three sort of buckets, as you would say. One is it hurts your ego, right? Just hurts to hear you didn't do something perfect. And that one is hard to get over. But I think the thing you're describing, like if you keep your eye on the prize, this design thing you're designing, then the feedback is a gift, right? And you can get over the ego part a little easier. Second is people don't think it's, they don't think they're going to get good feedback, right? This is a problem for women, problem for minorities. They tend not to get as much feedback and not as clear feedback. And so they don't seek it. The third one where I can help your listeners is they worry that it's going to hurt their image, that they're going to look weak, they're going to look insecure, they're going to look like they don't know what they're doing in the first place. And I will agree, if you seek feedback all the time, it can get to that. But we have data that shows exactly the opposite. It makes you look like you care. You care how the team's doing. You care about individually how people are perceiving things and what's working for them and not working for them. And so take that one off the table, the image concern. It actually makes you look a lot better. And then, if you keep your eye on the prize, the ego issue goes down quite a bit. You're focused on what you're achieving.
So you've run these experiments and you then seek this feedback. And then what happens next in terms of the practices?
Well, there's one practice that linearly probably happens next called reflection, but one we haven't talked about, though you've referred to it, is emotion management. And I look at that as something that happens all the way throughout the whole thing. If you have a performance-proof mindset, it heightens your anxiety. You bring that emotion with you into your experiences, makes it less easy for you to read feedback. It makes it less, likely for you to stay open to learning on and growing on a particular goal. So, it's your emotions are not always your friend in this set of ideas. And anxiety in particular gets in the way. Anxiety about, am I going to achieve? Is one, but also anxiety about how I look to other people. How are they seeing me? Do they like, everything from do they like me to, will they end up promoting me? All that being seen anxiety looms kind of large. And so it helps to have, and the book outlines some sort of emotion management strategies that you can use.
What's the favorite that you use?
Well, the one I always think about, because it just cracks me up because it was so true, is it's called situation modification. And when I was the school's senior associate dean, which was my first leadership role, there was a guy and he just drove me crazy. He was negative, jaded, cynical, didn't respect, deans come, deans go, and I just said, I can't meet him on Mondays or Fridays. By Wednesday, I could pretty much meet him, because I had a like every other week meeting with him. And, so that was a way to modify the situation so that my emotions weren't affected, but the emotion I get that hurts me the most and I have to control in some way is anxiety about impressions. For example, you're teaching a difficult topic. Let's say I know you teach undergrads sometimes. Let's say you want to teach them to kind of be open. You guys are way too closed to feedback to this. They're probably not going to like that topic. They're not going to like being accused of that. And that makes my anxiety go up. And so I really have found the strategy that works for me is to keep my eye on the longer term prize, right? That I know this will help them be more effective. And, my job is to show them ways. And if they're not liking it in the moment, to sort of sit with that anxiety and know that it's on a path towards something good. That's helped me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I teach and practice myself some of the reappraisal, right? That, and I'm thinking of I think it's Alison Brooks's work at Harvard, that I'm not nervous or anxious. I'm excited.
Yes, I'm passionate. Yeah.
Right. I'm passionate. And that arousal is, I'm not trying to calm it down. I'm just trying to, relabel it. And because it's harder to suppress that high arousal emotion versus, change the meaning. And we actually, in one of my courses, they end up singing karaoke, in front of their peers, by themselves. And we reappraise about how excited we are before we go through the experience. And, just to your point, because the ability to manage that can stop a lot of this micro learning if the anxiety takes over. So we have emotions that we're managing throughout this process, and then there's some reflection and meaning making that we're doing.
Yes, and this is probably for busy people the biggest challenge. Both because it is true that people are busy, managers are busy. I always cite the Henry Mintzberg research where they said, act like you came down from Mars. What do these people called managers do? And then, they say, well, they run from phone call to phone call, extinguish fire after fire, answer emails constantly, we're busy, right? So that's one reality. But there's also data showing that we don't really like being alone with our thoughts and feelings, that it introduces some existential dread, ego threat, all that stuff. And there's actually data where they said, would you prefer to spend 15 minutes with your thoughts and feelings or get a shock from a 9-volt battery? And most people, particularly males more than females, chose the 9-volt battery, shocking themselves rather than thinking. One man shocked himself 190 times in those 15 minutes, like, I don't want to be alone. And there's philosophers and poets have talked about this, how, we get ourselves really busy so we don't have to be in touch with all of this that's going on, our existential dread, our uncertainty about whether we have any value, our shame about something we just said by accident, or all the thoughts and feelings that are in there too. But it turns out that engaging in reflection, helps people perform above what their natural abilities would indicate. That there's something about sitting down and thinking a bit systematically about what happened, why did it go that way, what did I learn from it, how does this relate to my general pattern of, X, Y, or Z, for Simon, the formidable person, how does this relate to my general pattern of being seen as formidable? What do I want to do about it now? There's data that shows that particularly for people hoping to grow their leadership, the more they think systematically about those things, the more payoff there is for their leadership. And also, this was a study of students, and it also looked at their internship offers, number of internship offers, and salary. And both of those were 10% higher if you had been in the systematic reflection group. So it helps you to tell the story of who you are, how you're growing, how you can contribute, that kind of thing. So reflection can be really important. We shy away from it. It's just finding a way to make it happen in your life. And go ahead.
And so you talk about, that can be journaling, that can be, reflecting with other people and just and chit-chatting about what happened. It can be, which I also love, the teaching, where you can coach or teach others about your experience. And then the one that we actually, we've been doing much more of, as an organization here, is from the military, that after action review process.
Right.
That's a really simple framework to just, how did it go? What went well? What didn't go so well? What could we change in the future? And again, but that goes to that piece of that experiences themselves don't teach. It's that reflection piece that's so critical to get the learning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And they operate as a system. The more you have a learning mindset, the more open your reflection is going to be. The more you've sought feedback, the more information you're going to have to guide your growth to be maximally effective for the people in your situation. The more you've brought a focus, the more focused your reflection can be. So, but if you just did any one of those, if you just found some time to reflect generally, it would help. If you found some time to reflect with a more of a systematic approach, that would help even more. So that's what I like about the 6 practices, is that they kind of reinforce each other. One enhances the other.
And so let's now step back from that and look at, as a leader, helping enable this in an organization or for others. And so you cover some of those topics in the book. What would be, 1 or 2 things that you would advise someone leading if they wanted to create much more of a culture of flexing, where they're running these experiences and these reflections and seeking feedback? What are the 1 or 2 things you think is most valuable for leaders to think about?
Yeah, I think it's to remember that when you ask employees about culture, their answers are swayed very heavily by their boss. Because we often think of culture as, oh, well, that's so big, I can't affect that. That comes down from the top. But when you ask employees, they're really relating to that person directly above them, their boss, which then gives you a lot of power to create a microclimate in your unit, with your team, with the individuals who report to you. So, things that you can do from the research we've done, one of them is just the questions you ask. I cite a researcher who worked with, his research project was to ask people, how have you grown? And he'd meet with them every 2 months. He goes, well, how have you grown in the last 2 months? And he said, at first it was really awkward, but after a while, because they knew he'd be asking, they had answers. It was now on their agenda. They were thinking about it. Well, if your boss is asking you, how have you grown? What experiments have you tried? How are you going to try to make that different? You're going to start paying attention to it. So I think that's one. And we actually, for an executive program we did here, we invented a coach's guide. So we actually have a little book, 6 by 6. If I had it right here, I'd show you. Where, it basically gives bosses or anyone coaching anyone the questions to ask about growth mindset, about setting a learning focus, about experiments. And so that can be super useful. I think you can figure out what is it we could ask to help. So then the second one, I think, would be, what do you share yourself as the boss? As the leader, to create your microclimate? Do you share only your very polished, super amazing final PowerPoint presentation, or do you share some of the ups and downs along the way, the mistakes you've made, things you wished you had done a little bit differently, having a difficult conversation with someone where you apologize for something? The more you do that, the more other people can do that. Because they're role modeling off of you. So I think when you think about changing the culture, I have a whole chapter on Satya Nadella at Microsoft and what he has done in that organization, which I think is very impressive and informative. But most people aren't going to be CEO, but you've got a team that's looking up to you, and you are the culture setter for them. And so there's a lot of small things you can do.
Where do you find this little book on questions? I'd love to get one of those myself. Is that
I have
Where
one
do we
right
find
up
that?
there.
Okay.
No,
Can you buy this? Is it something you can buy?
buy this. I
Okay.
work with a small consulting firm in California that ended up doing the design work for this and produces it. Maybe do you have notes on your thing? We could put it in the notes for
Okay. Great.
for the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
It's called Enliven Work.
Okay. Great.
Enliven work. And you can get to that through their website, and they now will sell them. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else that from, writing this book, from seeing executives, from coaching, people on this process, that you'd want people to kind of, as a kind of a core takeaway for them to remember from what you've written and researched?
Yeah, that's kind of where we started with agency, which is this is a very empowering and empowered perspective. It says basically you get to own the journey of your life, even if you work within constraints. The journey is yours to own. And what do you want it to be? How do you want this life to turn out? What kind of person do you want to call into being and become? And I find that a joy. And I just feel, I think people have that power, and that power fits with the age we're in now, where companies are dissolving and companies that were secure are laying off people. And it was great to be a lawyer. Now it's scary to be a lawyer. All this craziness going on in the world. And to feel like there's a place and a way that you can take the power on, I think is a good feeling. And I hope that people will feel that from that. This is supposed to be empowering you, not that you have to do it alone, but that you can do a lot of it just through your own agency.
And you can do it in the situations that maybe are the most challenging or the most new, which is
the most mundane.
Or the most mundane. Or the most
when
mundane.
People come into my office, I can work on my multitasking tendency. It's a very mundane interaction, but it turns out it changes what I convey to them, their importance, how much I value them. And it's just a small mundane thing to change, but it matters. So from all of those, all the craziness that goes on in our life, from the mundane to the really difficult, can be fodder for your learning and growth if you put your mind to it and engage it in small ways.
This was fun, Sue. Not only just to catch up and talk to you, but again, you as a young doctoral student, you read all the papers in your seminars, and your papers are there, and to kind of step back and just have time to chat with you about all the things you've done, because you have done so many, from issue selling, to which we only kind of maybe touched on, to proactivity, to gig work. I mean, you've done leadership development, identity. You've done so many interesting and important things, and then to see them kind of come together in something that is, again, very simple and easy to be able to do, and it's easy to say, easy to do, but takes practice and takes some time. Yeah. It's really really cool. And what I enjoy about doing this podcast is I get to sit down and talk now with world experts on these topics, and walk away with things that I can put into practice myself. So it was fun catching up. And where can they learn more about your book, or your coaching, consulting, research, all that? Where should they go?
Yeah. So I have a website, susanashford.com, very easy to get to. And that will give you entree to, I do speaking, I do workshops, and also the book. There's also a quiz you can take. People love quizzes on these various practices. Kind of, where do you stand right now? And talking to you is a reminder to put something up about the coach's guide up there, which I will do.
Definitely. Definitely. And I will add those to the notes. Thanks again, Sue. Great to see you, and great to catch up.
It was my pleasure. Very enjoyable.
So we'll stop there.
Doug, really, you are so good at this. My goodness. I've done a lot of these, and I don't think I've ever had as much fun.
Well, this is I have, it's like, I thought what's really freeing for me is, this book, Rick Rubin, create the creative act. So Rick Rubin is, the expert, or the award-winning producer, and he's done everything from Kanye to Metallica to, he's got this big long beard, and he says, you should do it as art. And I found that just so freeing, because it's like, does the podcast get a bunch of views? Does it not? I don't really care. I want to have interesting conversations with people who are doing interesting things. And it's my art, and wherever it goes, if it gets likes, if it doesn't get likes, if it gets cited, I view it as art. And that's been fun for me, because I can then read these books and say, this is how I can bring it into my own, practice, the work I'm doing, the company I'm running now, all of that. So, and I get to take, I done all this qualitative research on interviewing. I could use that in something different. So,
yeah, well, it was extremely enjoyable. And the Rick Rubin thing, that's how I wrote the whole book. I mean, that my book was really a tale of two stories. The story to get a contract, which was really hard. And then the story of writing the book. And writing the book was a total joy. I mean, it was, like chapter 4, like, I don't know what to say about goals and blah, blah,
Yeah.
But, as Sally Maitlis pointed out at one point, she goes, you said that about chapter 2 as well.
Well, so viewing it as art, so the label is art, and then the other orientation is you make it for yourself.
Well, I called it letting go of the outcome.
Letting go of the outcome.
People ask me all the time, how is the book doing? And in my view, it's doing amazing, because, I've had people like you call me up and want to chat about it. I have people who come up and tell me, we've woven it into this program for minority leaders that are, that a company is trying to invest in to help them, get more, like that's a goal that really matters to me. My kids know what it is, but, my family knows what it is. So to me, it's doing amazing. And then they go, well, but how many has it sold? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I get these reports. I don't really understand them. I mean, I'm not sure it's doing amazing, but it's doing amazing according to me.
So it's make it for yourself. Like, make it so you like it and how you want it, and you consume it. And if other people like it, well, that's okay. And I think the other thing we didn't get into, but I think what I was immediately thinking about my kids and how important this is. And you talk about your kids in the book, how important this is for kids to get early on their understanding and orientation to the world on this. That's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, this is the coaching guide.
Very nice.
Really well. So, and Live and Work is Monica, by the way.
Monica okay. Yep. Yeah.
So
no, I'm going to check that out. I love this idea of just putting in place those questions.
Well, I'm going to let her know that people are coming her way. So anyway, this was super fun. Thank you. You're good at it. It's very enjoyable. Plus, I've done a lot of these, and you can tell the people who, have looked over the book and have 5 questions to ask. And like, you've read the book.
Yeah.
You can tell the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was great. So we'll have this, so we're July 11th. My sense is, so I've done, I don't know, 6 or 7 of these. I got a couple more lined up. So I think probably starting next week, these will come out. So probably 4 weeks, maybe ish. Okay. We'll probably once a week, and I'll let you know when it's ready to go. And I'll post it out on social media, and we'll have the YouTube thing up, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Very fun. Who knew Doug Lepisto would be this person?
Well, you have no clue. I mean, we didn't even get into all the stuff I'm doing now, Sue. I mean, we're buying these businesses. And
I heard business. What business are you running?
So we've raised $60 million in a fund.
Is this your leadership center, or is something completely different?
Something separate, something related but separate. So my partner Derek and I raised the fund. And so we are now we are training and sourcing executives to buy and operate small businesses in West Michigan. So
you're like Private
equity fund.
Private equity.
We're a private equity long-term fund, and then we're taking our center and we're training the people to come in to operate those businesses. And then at the undergraduate level, we're taking those students and then integrating them through internships, externships, projects into the companies that we end up acquiring. And because of those synergies, we can do more impactful projects and all that. So yeah, I'm an entrepreneur now.
You're gonna be a mogul.
Business. So we have
mogul.
We have 5 people now. So full-time people, and yeah, so it's we're people don't quite understand what we've built yet, but I think in a few years though they're going to start to see it, and we've created something pretty. I'm having a lot of fun just innovating that way, and being creative, building. So yeah. So I'm downtown Kalamazoo in my office at Sleeping Giant Capital.
Sleeping Giant
Capital.
And are you still an academic?
I'm still an academic, but I have talk about you want to do I've thought about doing some weird autoethnography of this, but I mean, to be a professor and a private equity fund manager is a very weird thing for people to be able to understand. And I code switch all day long. I'm talking to you as a professor, an academic. I've had a phone call this morning with a business owner, a seller, and we're talking about valuation of their business and all this other stuff. So I go into these very different worlds. And so now I mean, here's a weird, this kind of sums it up. I was invited by the Western Michigan University has a finance department, has a finance club, and the finance club invited me to talk on employer night about private equity. Does that make any sense at all? I don't know. It makes no sense. So, but that's what I'm doing.
Well, it's also one of those, isn't life funny? Like who would have thought I'd end up here kind of thing. So there's a session, I was just in the Academy of Management meeting program, and there's a session on meaning, various paths and meaning in them, that looked really good. You would have been a great person for that, but it's like, Dolly Chugg is on there, because she's written 2 books and she clearly is in the book speaker, that kind of thing.
I'm probably the only tenured Ph.D. professor maybe in the world that also started a private equity fund.
I'll bet. Yeah.
So and the reason your book resonates for me is like, I'm always, and I find the notion of this adventure idea, that's I run my life on adventure. So if I have something new like this all the time, which is what you get in this world, like I got to learn finance, I got to learn valuation, I got to learn deal structure, M&A. I mean, all how to operate companies, boards. I'm doing all of this stuff. And so it's always learning. It's always interesting. I get to make an impact. We get to make people CEOs. We give great experience to our students. So I'm having a total blast.
How did this get started? I mean, I remember I spent a day walking around Seattle with you. I don't remember this coming up.
No, this was, when was Seattle?
Probably 2018, maybe.
Yeah. So we raised $6.5 million in 2019 for our center. And then we've raised about $60 million into this fund through COVID.
You were doing the center raising.
So we've raised almost $70 million now.
And the $6.5 million for the center, was that out of Western Michigan, or
those are donations to Western? Yeah.
No. But I mean, was it the place where the money's coming from? Is it all those wealthy people in Western Michigan, or is it local or international?
It's people who care about West Michigan, people who live in West Michigan, Western Michigan University alums. It's people up in Grand Rapids that care about West Michigan, and there's a lot of small businesses here, and a lot of baby boomers who are looking to retire, and they've got a profitable business. They don't want a private equity firm buying it and selling it 5 years. We're a long-term hold fund. We're based here in the community. We have a connection to the university. We're
Love it.
empowering the next generation. So we try to be an alternative to them. That's our
I love it.
that's our value prop. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Ah, who would have thunk it?
Not me. I mean, I know that was never in the cards.
Yeah.
So
Well, this was great. I so enjoyed talking to you, and I know we're over, but thank you for this, and I'll look forward to having it out. I will promote it as much as I can, and great fun.
sounds great.
All right.
Great to talk to you, Sue. Good to see you.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.